Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher. Welcome to the Sweetwater Minute. Our guest today, Nigel Dick, director, producer, writer, musician, guitar player, bassist, photographer, cyclist, and just married.
Yes, for the first time.
Yes.
Forgive me for giving you the finger.
I don't know if that was the right order for all of those titles, but it's a shame you haven't had more of a career. It's
been a long, fantastic and crazy ride.
Absolutely amazing. Something like 500 music videos?
That's on some page, and it's actually inaccurate. It's 360 some now. But
see, that's what I get for believing the internet.
Over 600 productions.
Wow, certainly. 600 productions. So Guns N' Roses, Sweet Child of Mine, Britney Spears, Oops, I Did It Again, Maybe One More Time, Cher, Believe, Nickelback, Oasis, Paul McCartney, Elton John. Should I go on through all 360 some of them? Absolutely amazing. Plus documentary films, feature films. So how does a guy who started out in architecture school and did some mime end up in that situation?
By pure luck, actually.
Yeah?
Like many of the people who walk through this building every day, I wanted to be a musician, and that didn't work out terribly well. And one day, by sheer luck, I managed to get a gig at a record company, a punk label called Stiff Records. And from there, I moved to a larger, sort of more corporate label called Phonogram, which was part of Polygram. And during that process, stumbled into making videos. I started out producing, and then because I took a lot of photographs, I was asked to, we've got no money today, we need to make a music video, would you go for it? And this was actually before MTV started. Mm-hmm. So, there weren't any rules, like there aren't really any rules now, and I just went for it, and I got lucky, and very, very early on, within the space of about 7 weeks, did about 4 videos, which all became very big international hits. Mm-hmm. So in the space of, as I say, 6 weeks, I suddenly had a reel which people knew all the videos on it, and that was, I was just very lucky. Mm-hmm. I happened to be in the right place at the right time.
So what were those first videos?
Shout by Tears for Fears, Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Tears for Fears, Things Can Only Get Better by Howard Jones, and Do They Know It's Christmas by Band Aid.
Right.
So all on the label that I was working at, Phonogram, and apart from Howard Jones. And just, as I say, luck. They just came out, one after the other in different countries. And at one point, 2 of them were in the charts in the States. And suddenly you have a career where just a few weeks before, nobody gave a damn.
Right. That's amazing. Amazing. So did you have any video experience or any production experience at all before that?
Absolutely none.
Wow.
Nothing at all. The first job I actually had technically in the business, I was producing a video clip for Madness. We had Madness on our label at Stiff, who, as I say, predated MTV and were very well known, certainly in Europe, for their music videos. And I was the producer, and we were shooting it on film. And at 9 o'clock in the morning, the cameraman comes up to me, or the camera assistant comes up to me and said, "Where's the film stock?" And I said, "What's that?" At which point the rest of the crew just went, "No." So luckily the cameraman happened to have a spare reel of 16mm film in the trunk of his car. So he said, "We'll use this." And he gave me the address of the film stock centre in the centre of London. And I got in my car and I drove like hell into Wardour Street and opened an account and got some film. So that's how my career started.
Wow. Kind of frantically.
As they say, it's a job which you can really learn on the job, and arguably is possibly that's the best way to learn. Mm-hmm.
So as the director, for those of us who aren't that involved in video, what does that really mean? What does the director do on a music video versus a documentary versus a feature film?
Certainly, arguably in a music video, probably the director actually has more control perhaps than any other form of filmmaking on some level. And potentially, in a perfect situation, you're given the song, here's the budget, here's where we'd like to shoot, what have you got? And you come up with an idea, and then you sell it to everybody, explain how it's going to get done, and hopefully you get the thumbs up and the rubber stamp, and then you go off and shoot it. And by and large, you're pretty much left to your own devices. So if it's successful, you are entirely to your credit, and if it's a failure, you can blame nobody else but yourself.
Right.
So you pretty much come up with everything. I mean, obviously this is a generalization, but it's quite unlike most features nowadays, television or documentary, where you do have quite a lot of control over what happens and how it's executed.
Does the artist have a lot of input on that, or do you go into them and say, okay, Slash, you're doing this, and Axl, you're doing this, and Britney, you're doing this?
It varies. My attitude is that I'm trying to make a music video which assists the artist in their career, to say this is who I am, or this is what this new record is about, or my new look, or whatever it may be. And the best way to ensure that I'm making a Nickelback video and not a Britney Spears video, because you don't want those two artists mixed up in anybody's dream or nightmare, is to allow them to have some input. So, I mean, for instance, Britney's Baby One More Time, I wrote a treatment which she hated, and she said, I want to be in a schoolroom with a load of cute boys. So that was pretty much the brief. And, you know, my initial reaction is, hang on, I've got a 16-year-old girl telling me what to do. And then I suddenly realised, well, maybe this 16-year-old girl has a better perspective on what she and her peers want to see. So you take it on board, and then I came up with how that idea would work. So I had a one-sentence brief, and using again the Nickelback example, very often I've done 15 or 16 videos for them now. They are actually quite clear. This is the story, this is the beginning, this is the middle, and this is how we'd like it to end. And once we've established what that story is and who the characters are, it's then up to me to make it happen. So that's pretty much the sort of the A and the Z of the range of how it may come. And I'm quite happy with that because, again, I think it allows the artist to put their identity into the clip. If they want to take over and direct, I go, bye. I let them do it, because otherwise, why am I there? But as long as they allow me then to go and do what I do, that's fine.
Right. So how do you find the locations where you shoot? You're actually here in Fort Wayne shooting a video for a band, The Fringe, that recorded here in Sweetwater Studios. How did you find, for example, here in Fort Wayne, the location where you're going to be shooting with them?
Well, very often you need a specific location. So this video is going to be set in a school. So you go around and you look for places which are schools, and if that's not available, then you find somewhere which looks like a school and you try and figure out how to do it. In this particular case for The Fringe, which I'm shooting here tomorrow, you know, we've got it's a 5 loaves and 3 fishes kind of budget. So I just said, what have we got here in Fort Wayne? Let's not try and show me the marina in Fort Wayne. There isn't a marina in Fort Wayne. So let's see what we have. And for the kind of music that we're shooting tomorrow, something, you know, a bit grungy and industrial feels right. And so we looked at a bunch of places yesterday, and I found a place which I feel is perfect for a number of practical and creative reasons. And I said, this is going to work. So now actually this is a job where the location has kind of helped me create the story. This isn't a story video, this is really about showing who the guys are and how they play and all the rest of it. So every job is slightly different, but yeah, tomorrow's shoot is location specific, really.
When I just collected you to come shoot this video with me, you were working on, looked like storyboard images for the video tomorrow. How exactly do you plan all the shots out, or is there a lot of improvisation when you get to the location?
Well, I think the rule is that each plan falls apart when you engage with the enemy, but it's good to have a plan. So, especially with filmmaking, where you have such an enormous amount of work to do in a compressed amount of time, it's very good to have a plan. So if everything is falling apart, you know at least what you need to achieve. If suddenly the sun breaks out and certain angles are working and others aren't, and magic happens, then you have to follow that road, that yellow brick road that's suddenly opened up in front of you. But you have to have some in your mind a list of things you want to achieve, so that you know that you're going to be able to edit it together. So you shouldn't really walk into a studio to record a piece of music unless you know how many bars the guitar solo is, and the dynamics of coming down in the bridge and coming back for the third chorus. And you can certainly go in and, well, we got a rough idea, and you can wing it, but that might take a lot of time. And usually when you're shooting, time is not something you have a lot of. Right.
In addition to the conceptual, if you will, style videos, you've also shot a lot of live concert videos. What's the difference there?
Well, again, what you're trying to do is to capture the artist and find out what they do. And one of the things, again, which making film is a bit like architecture, is what I was trained to do, is that it's a match of artistic needs and very, very practical ones, so that maybe for reasons of finance you have 6 cameras, but there's 12 people in the band. So you can't put a camera on each guy or girl. So what you have to do is really, what I certainly do, is get a knowledge of the show. So I will actually try and get a recording of the show in advance, and then I'll sit down and I will write out every bar of the show.
Wow.
From beginning to end. So I get a file about this thick, and I'm flipping through, and then I can say, camera 3, you need to pan right, from the bass player to the guitar player. He's now going to give you an 8-bar solo, and it starts in 3, 2, go. And so he's already there, he's in focus on the guitar. I think we've all seen a lot of TV shows where, the band's on stage, and when the guitar solo starts, always it's on the bass player. It's unbelievable. Well, I never get a second take. Occasionally I get to shoot another show, but nearly always I'm doing it for the first time. So I can't afford to do that. I can't afford to have the guitar player in 3 weeks' time screaming at me down the phone. So I need to make sure I'm covering that person. So it's a bunch of creative needs with very, very practical ones. And then you look, hopefully you're in a truck and you've got a bunch of TV screens in front of you, and you've got to go, camera 2, you've got to get wider, because suddenly you realise that everybody is shooting a shot this size. So you have to have a variation, so that in editorial somebody will come along and say, this lasts too long, I want to go to another shot. And if you don't have it, then you're in difficulty.
Right.
So, but at the same time, you've got to feel the music, try and match your shots to the way the show is lit and all the rest of it. And very often you're using cameramen and camerawomen who've never seen the show before. So they are completely relying on information you're feeding them through their ear. And in extreme circumstances, you might find yourself in a situation where those cameramen and camerawomen are speaking a language which is different to yours. So you have to give instructions to your AD, who hopefully is bilingual and can translate it into Romanian or whatever the language of the day is, so that they can pass the information along, that's a really difficult show.
Yeah, no doubt.
But luckily most people speak English, because my other languages aren't very good. So
makes it much worse. Everybody understands that.
They know
right?
when I'm screaming down the, then they know something's not going too good.
Right. So how has technology affected what you do? GoPro cameras, all of that kind of thing. Has that changed your approach to the way you make videos?
We live in the best of times and the worst of times in a way. The best of times is that now for $5 or $6 grand you can have a camera which records beautiful, stable, sharp images which are totally broadcast quality, whereas even a dozen years ago that was an impossible. You would spend $5 grand a day on renting gear.
Right.
So, and then you'd have to buy the film, and then you'd have to process the film, and then you have to transfer the film. So those particular costs have absolutely shrunk remarkably. But of course, now what's happened is that everybody is a director. Everybody has shot themselves in their bedroom,
right,
playing to Gary Moore or whatever the heck it is. And so the trick now is to make sure that you are using the toys effectively and properly, so that it's a bit like being in the studio with a Les Paul and a Marshall stack and trying to make it sound like a Fender through a Twin.
Right.
You know, you have these tools. Let's use them in the right ways, and know what you can and cannot get with a GoPro, and why you should use a GoPro for a certain shot and not another one. So, and of course now the technology is changing all the time, and suddenly you could shoot this on iPhones, you could do this, and of course you can do it with all of these things. The trick is to make sure that you're doing the right thing for the right reasons. 'Tis the greatest treason to do the right thing for the wrong reason.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So you also have scored a number of film productions and things. How does the fact that you are such an experienced director affect the way you approach scoring music for a production?
The experienced director gets very frustrated with the not terribly experienced musician part of me. I mean, by and large, the issue that I have personally is that I become very attached to the music, and I'm not such a brilliant musician. I can go, well, you know, if I went to a minor here and, you know, change the tempo or whatever, it's just, well, this is the way it turned out. So if you don't like it, pal, we're going to have to come up with another piece. So very often, what I've actually tended to do now is that I used to write songs because I wanted to make another album, or I was playing in a band or whatever. Now I just churn out a whole bunch of instrumental stuff and stack it away in a pile. And then when a piece comes along, like when I did the Sweetwater piece in which I interviewed you, I just tried out 4 or 5 tracks until I found one that worked. It's like, okay, that works, that's great. So it's a bit sort of reverse engineering. I've tried to write pieces for particular clips, and it's not been terribly successful. And that, I think, in some level is the universe telling me that I did wind up in the right place, much as I would love to have been a professional musician. Right, right.
Have you had good experiences or a different perspective as a director working with someone composing music for you?
I've had fantastic experiences, by and large, because I understand, of course, being a musician, that having a third party come and just say about your piece of music that you've just spent 3 days slaving over, well, I'm sorry, it's not working for me, is very challenging. There's also the very difficult part about matching music to film, is that what we do most of the time when you start first cutting the scene to get the mood of the scene is you find a piece of music off the shelf. So you put in, I don't know, Thriller or something in the background, and you go, this is perfect, it's just right. Well, of course, and you can't afford to have this piece of music underneath, so then you ring up the guy or the girl who's going to be providing you with the music, who of course is much cheaper, and try as they might, they're never ever going to match that first piece of music you fell in love with a scene. And we call it temp love, because the first piece of music you use is the temp music. So the trick is actually to make sure that the piece of music that you're temping with is something potentially you might be able to get later. So by and large, I try now with experience, so I don't fall into that trap and then constantly be disappointed by the piece of music I'm supplied, try and ask the composer to come up with something in advance, and which matches a bunch of moods. So then we know the pace and the feel and all the rest of it, and then we can go, you know what, this is working great, but less horns and more strings, please, or, whatever it may be. Perhaps we can use exactly the same piece of music in this scene, but instead of guitar, bass and drums, perhaps we can do it all with synths now. So you get the same piece but a different feel.
Right.
And then you're not disappointing yourself, and you're not frustrating the person who's slaving away in a small bedroom with fingernails on the wall after they put the phone down on me.
Right, right. So you've also worked on, as I mentioned, a number of documentaries, feature films. How is that different from what you do when you're making a short-form music video?
The difference is quite major because, apart from the obvious differences of length and everything, if you're making a music video or even a film, you have a script. In a music video, the script is 3 minutes and 30 seconds with 2 verses, 3 choruses, and a guitar solo and a bridge or whatever it may be. When you start on a documentary, all you know is that we are making the Mitch Gallagher documentary. And we know Mitch's story, but perhaps we don't know where the end of the story is. Mm-hmm. And of course, you're always going towards that ending of the story, what you think is the ending of the story, but very often it isn't. And so you're sort of making it up as you go along. And a very good example, not a musical one, but if you've seen The Armstrong Lie, which is about the director was following Lance Armstrong through the 2009 Tour de France, which I happened to be actually working at as a cameraman. Mm-hmm. And of course, it's all about Lance's comeback. He's coming back from, it's all going to be fantastic, blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly there's all the dark cloud comes over, and he eventually, 4 or 5 years later, confesses to doing drugs. Well, suddenly that story has a different twist on it, because quite obviously there's a whole bunch of subtext and going on. And Alex Gibney, the director, went back to Lance and said, "You owe me an explanation, and I want to have that." And that's what the film became about. So it was not the film they started out making. It became a very, very different film. So documentary making is very often like that. And I've actually had, on one particular film I did, had a very clear idea in my mind where the film was going to end. And when we got there, it was like, this is a letdown. And then something else happened, which we weren't planning on. And it was much, much better. Right. So you just have to be open.
Yeah, absolutely. It has to be kind of exciting in a way to see where it's going to end up.
Terrifying, but exciting.
That was the other word I was going to say.
Yes, I mean, at what point does exciting become terrifying, or the other way around?
Right.
It's exciting afterwards.
Yes,
at the time, it's
in hindsight.
You're petrified.
So you have become something of a regular here at Sweetwater. You've been out a number of times shooting different sessions in the studio, and you made one of your Dick strips videos here. How did you end up finding Sweetwater? What was the connection that brought you here in the first place?
I bought a bunch of gear and the check bounced. So they had no, seriously. I was actually a client. I bought a bunch of stuff online and had a very good experience. No BS. It was a wonderful experience.
Great.
I thought, I like these guys. The follow through service was fantastic. And then Carl Verheyen came here to make his album with Mark. And I believe Mark said to Carl, "I'd like to film this. Do you know anybody? Do you know a sucker who'd like to sit here in a dark room with us for the next few months?" So I got the call and I was like, wow, this is great. So I came out, and so far nobody's rumbled me they haven't found out the truth about me yet, so I'm still coming back. And it's been great. It's wonderful.
Right. You had worked with Carl before that.
Yeah.
You did a concert film with him, correct?
I did a concert film with him. I've done lots of little things for him. So, being, if I can use the term rather loosely, a musician myself, to meet Carl and watch him play and hang out with him and look through all his guitars and what is fantastic. And he's, as we'll find out if you see the film which we've made of him making this album, he's got a stash of wonderful stories. And it's very pleasurable for me to spend time with somebody like that who I admire. And even though, I watch at this range, without him plugged in and go, oh my God, you want to just pull a switchblade out of your pocket and cut all his fingers off. But, out of jealous revenge. But, it's fantastic. So I'm very lucky to be able to be up close with people whose work I admire. Right.
Fantastic. So you've interviewed me twice.
Yes.
This is the first time I've interviewed you. Which was better?
There's many responses to that. Well, I suppose the truth of it is it's always wonderful to talk about yourself, isn't it? So It was all fun.
There you go. Very politically correct answer. I appreciate that.
Thank you. No, it was genuinely so.
Awesome. Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. Always great to see you. You do such great work, and we can't wait to see the video that you're shooting tomorrow, the film with Carl. Lots of great stuff coming up. So thanks for sitting in with us today.
Pleasure. Thanks very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks, Mitch. Thank you.
I'm Mitch Gallagher. Thanks for joining me for the Sweetwater Minute.